I am Besport Kosovo, a project manager and researcher at Balkan Green Foundation, an organization that promotes sustainable development in the Western Balkans and in Kosovo, and is very active in the energy and environmental spheres. Today we are going to talk about the energy transition in Kosovo. Um, in this slide, we can see that the energy situation in Kosovo is very much dependent on fossil fuel, and Kosovo has one of the highest amounts of coal in not just Europe but also the world. It is estimated that the brown coal reserves or lignite is about 12 billion tons, and it is exclusively used here in Kosovo to produce electricity at 99%, while the rest of it is being used for industrial purposes in cement industry and also in smelting. Two thermal power plants are the main generators of electricity in Kosovo that come from very polluting coal, which are located in Obilic near Pristina, with Kosovo A and Kosovo B power plants that are producing around 93% of the electricity in the country now. This dependency on coal was even higher. It used to be 97%, but thanks to new investments in wind power and other renewable energy sources, the share of fossil fuels has dropped a little bit, but still the potential is very high and untapped. In the next slide, we can see that the key developments in the energy and environment sector can be considered that the decarbonization terminology has entered the social discourse and also the political discourse. The new government and the political landscape is changing towards decarbonization and the energy transition concept. Before, everything was focused on using the very large domestic coal reserves, which have a very negative impact on people's health and also on the environment. They are taking a very high toll and lowering productivity. But now the new political era, so to say, is going towards decarbonization and energy transition, at least so in paper, so to say, or in theory, because we also have seen some tendencies to reconstruct, for example, Kosovo A, and during the energy strategy, which is in revisal now, the civil society has been left out of the process, and there is a lack of transparency for the moment, and we do not know if Kosovo A is going to be reconstructed. If that happens, then our commitments towards the energy community for decarbonization and RES increase to 32% will definitely stagnate, and we will not do a step forward. But the government is thinking of the security of supply concern, which can easily be replaced with new investments in renewable energy sources, particularly so in wind power. Some wind power capacities have been installed and are running, like Selat's wind power farm, which has an installed capacity of 105 megawatts and has generated around an annual generation of 360 gigawatt hours, while the estimated potential is around more than 2,000 gigawatt hours annually just from wind. From the rest sources, renewable energy sources, now this number is quite low. It is estimated that just from wind around 420 gigawatt hours have been used. There are private investments and interests to invest in renewable energy, but there are some obstacles that hinder investments in the renewable energy sector. A very positive and very important development is that the cost or the system transmission operator of Kosovo has become independent of the transmission system operator of Serbia. And now Kosovo is trying to create a market coupling with Albania, as is required by the Energy Treaty Community. Some other positive developments in the energy and environment sector, besides that the mindset has shifted away from solely investing in coal and building a huge power plant, which was until now the strategy of all governments. The World Bank has expressed a large interest in providing funds for energy efficiency in public buildings and the government itself. And then MFK has supported projects that renovate buildings and increase energy efficiency, and also an expressed interest in building a 200 megawatt capacity battery for balancing the grid. Um, New tariffs have been approved with block tariffs, which can have a good impact on lowering the demand in the distribution grid, as the demand was going very high and was reaching the limit of the distribution grid. The Energy Regulatory Office, which is the main stakeholder of the energy system in Kosovo, has foreseen that the maximum peak would be achieved in just 4 years, and then the system would reach its technical limits, and large defects would ensue due to this process, and therefore it was very important to create an incentive to lower the demand, because a lot of residential units were using electricity to heat their homes, and this was basically creating very big hurdles and difficulties in the grid, so the energy then would not be easily distributed to the rest of the country and create problems. There are large interests in developing renewable energy projects, especially in wind and solar. Um, Gas has been cancelled, and we consider it to be a large sunk cost, because gas has a very high price volatility, and this creates problems in the future because we cannot foresee the price of gas, which then creates problems with security of supply, and also has a very negative impact on inflation and energy prices in general of the economy. And there is also the process, it is more political now than it is technical, that the company to distribute electricity in the north, Elektrosever, is in the process of reviewing the application. If that would happen, then losses in the north would fall dramatically, because now the energy that goes in the north is basically unpaid, and it is used, and it is creating problems for the rest of the energy sector in Kosovo because of deviations which Kosovo has to pay for. And then there is a big project to create district heating and to extend it via solar heating panels, and also a larger solar farm which is going to be put at the close proximity of Kosovo A power plant, using the soil, the terrain that has been degraded by mining activities. Energy transition and climate change are very much interlinked, and one without the other does not have the base, so to say. It is very important in curbing emissions, and energy transition is the way forward to do that. In order for us to stay at 3 degrees Celsius to avoid ecological catastrophe and the destruction of the environment where we live in, if we continue like this, we are going to reach at least 4 degrees Celsius, which is going to be a dramatic shift in the ecology of not just the Western Balkans, but also the world. And we have to do everything possible, at least to be within 3 degrees Celsius, even though this can sometimes be seen as very optimistic. Quite frankly, to say 2 degrees Celsius, as is by the climate, Paris Agreement, very difficult to be achieved, because we are not doing enough as a society in order to achieve that, not just Kosovo, but also the rest of the world. And energy transition creates better health outcome for the people, and creates better living standards and productivity for the workforce. And also it lowers societal stress, not just on the environment, but also bettering the society itself. Key emitters of greenhouse gases in Kosovo can be considered the energy sector, especially the electricity production sector, which is based mainly on very polluting brown coal. We are spending around 8 million tons burning it to produce energy, electricity mainly, and the heating sector, which uses a lot of particularly firewood in order to heat spaces, which is very inefficient and creates problems with air pollution. The industrial sector is also a very big emitter of greenhouse gases. The transport sector is also one of the most important emitters. The agricultural sector, especially with the practice of scorching the earth, which is a very bad form of agricultural practices that people use after harvest in order to clean lands. And the waste sector, especially landfills, um, they release a lot of methane into the atmosphere and are not treated. Wastewater treatment is basically inexistent in Kosovo, also including sewage water, which also release a lot of methane. These have to be, of course, dealt with. Um, Immediate policy actions that can be taken is to finish the revisal of the energy strategy and make it friendlier towards renewable energy sources. The adaptation of the law on renewables, that is still in draft phase. uh, Start with the auction schemes to lower energy subsidies and create a better price to customers. Until now, the feed-in tariffs were in force. If you were a private investor, you would build a wind farm, and then the state would guarantee you for 12 years 85 euros per megawatt hour that you would produce. But if we enter in force the auction system, then different companies will create competition between them, and this competition will ensure that this price is going to fall lower, and this in turn will um, bring lower electricity prices to the customers of Kosovo. And this is a form that is widely used in the world. Feed-in tariffs are not needed anymore because it is better to have into play the market forces in order to drive prices down and create more competition and create also more production. And one of the hindrances to the renewable energy sector in Kosovo is also the bureaucracy. We have a lot of investors in Kosovo who cannot uh, progress with their projects because of a lot of licenses needed for the projects and a lot of bureaucracy that has to be eased in order to accelerate the construction of these new generating units. Also, the prosumer concept is very small in Kosovo and needs to be distributed largely. A prosumer means that one customer of the energy situation, electricity, for example, he is not just a customer, but also a producer. So this means that they can exchange electricity to the grid and be compensated for this. This also helps the grid, but also lowers emissions and also reduces greenhouse gases. The other thing is especially the curbing of losses, especially since in the north there is no electricity being accounted for in the form of being paid. Energy efficiency needs to be ramped up, especially in the private sector, especially in the residential sector, which is lagging very much behind, and we have a very high energy intensity of 4 times larger than that of the European Union per energy unit. For more, it is very important to create a market coupling and create interconnectivity with the neighbors. This would help a lot in balancing out the intermittency of wind and solar, because wind does not always blow and the sun does not always shine. And this interconnectivity and balancing aspect would improve this situation dramatically. And this is also a requirement by the Energy Community Treaty in order to decarbonize not just our economy, but also that of the Western Balkans and of the Europe itself and the European Union. What we can say as the recommendations is that um, we have to align policies and strategic framework with the Energy Community Secretariat and implement all of these um, directives that come from being a member of the Energy Community Treaty, and lower demand through alternative sources for heating. This is extremely important to use energy efficient devices, and the government can do one very important step, that is the lowering of uh, taxes and customs for energy efficient devices, and also raise taxes and custom duties for energy inefficient devices. This would stimulate people to use appliances that might cost more, but they are much more efficient, and also help the planet and help themselves as well economically by paying lower energy prices for the use of these devices. And also, the government needs to stimulate people by creating funds that make it possible for them to renovate buildings in the residential sector and the private sector, not just the public sector. Very, very important is the ease of bureaucratic processes and shortening the time that it takes for the licensing process to be done. It was always mentioned in Kosovo that the one-stop shop for new investments in RES, in renewable energy sources, would be complete, but this has not been done until now, and this is very important to do in order to increase investments, because we have a very high potential, especially in wind power, which is not nearly enough used. And there is a potential that has been estimated by the Academy of Science of Kosovo, that the potential is around 2000 gigawatt hours, but we think that it might be even more than that. And solar is expected to be around 800 gigawatt hours, while hydropower is around 500 gigawatt hours. And most of that have been utilized the best spots, with very negative consequences to the environment, because small hydropower plants tend to uh, direct all the water from the small rivers and put it into massive pipes, and this will ensure that the rivers will die out, especially these small hydropower plants, because large hydropower plants can have a very good effect on balancing. And there are some projects. There is one project that is in the initial phase of taking the necessary permits and studies, and feasibility studies, of course, to create a small hydropower station to balance the energy from the intermittency, and play the role of a battery. For more, biomass and biogas is at the rate of 400 gigawatt hours annually. To have in mind, Kosovo's demand annually is around 6,000 gigawatt hours. If we combine all these energy sources, the renewable energy sources, we can come up with a number that says that nearly half of Kosovo's energy can come from renewables. Uh, for more, if we consider that we have losses of up to 23-25%, which means that 4,500 is the actual number of electricity required, gigawatt hours required annually, then this comes even closer to the um, decarbonization of the energy in Kosovo, the sector. But we cannot go totally um, on renewable energy sources, because we have to have in mind that RES has the intermittency problem, and the battery and energy storage is still not quite developed, and the technology for energy storage from renewable energy sources for the moment is very expensive. Therefore, we need to have a base load provider, and therefore we think that the base load provider can come from Kosovo B power plant, and the dispatch priority should be given to renewable energy sources, while Kosovo A power plant should be put either as a strategic reserve or altogether be dismantled. because the excess energy can come from renewable energy sources, and interconnectivity with the neighbors will provide us with energy when we need it. But in order to achieve this, it is very important to create the market coupling concept and also integrate to the larger European Union and so grid, and create also long-term um, agreements to exchange energy. The concept is very simple. If there is no wind in Kosovo, there might be wind, let's say, in Portugal, and then we can exchange energy from there to here. And when we have excess energy, we can export it firstly, let's say, to Albania, and then to Montenegro and to other countries. And then when we need that energy, we can get it back from the um, other countries. So this is basically the idea behind the Energy Community Treaty and for the process of decarbonization. Uh, what we can have as a conclusion and takeaways is that Kosovo needs to place a strong focus on advocating for solutions that promote development policies that are in line with EU integration and with the latest developments um, in the EU integration path. And it is very important for Kosovo to actively engage in regional initiatives and to show commitment towards regional sustainability and also do its share of action in climate action. Also ensure the strengthening and advancement of vital policies that affects the key sectors such as energy, environment, and the economy itself. Promote sustainable development, transform innovative concepts into powerful solutions, and strengthen regional and global partnerships. We are a small country, but still we have the fifth largest coal reserves. So even though we are geographically small, we are very large in terms of energy that comes from potentially energy that comes from coal, which basically needs to stay underground in order to help our planet and the climate stay at least under 3 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Celsius by 2100 in order for us to curb a global catastrophe that can have tremendous negative impacts on the species, on our species itself. And therefore, everyone needs to have their share in this. And Kosovo is also playing by the games, even though it's not a member of the Paris Agreement. It is showing very good commitments, even though in practice it needs to do more. Thank you very much. And this was my presentation. Thank you.